Yeah.
He emails me the same time every night for the last 2 weeks since I've talked to him. He's got me set up automated. But this is it. This tells you all about it.
Yeah.
And, you're right. I've been thinking about it. It's come up. And, if I keep doing this without a license, I'm going to get nailed by the FCC. Shit. Okay. And I'm a pirate radio station, as far as they're concerned. But
Absolutely,
I'm so far out in the country, I'm really don't think that I'm interfering with anybody. If I was, I'd probably know it by now.
Yeah.
The engineers would be raising hell, And I have been in contact with the FCC and stuff. And they don't know when the window it just closed for low-powered radio stations to get a license.
Right.
They said the only way I could get one is buying it from someone that wants to get out of it.
Right.
And they're not issuing any right now. I have my call letters will be WDWT 102.7. Do I go through here? Or?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
it's just a left-hand turn and you go back to the interstate that way.
Right on. And
what is the repercussions for operating a pirated radio station?
For me, it would probably be, from what I understand, if I'm nice,
right,
they'll probably slap me on the hand and say, "Nope, can't do that," and give me a warning. And if I do it again, then like $10,000 fine and up to 1 to 5 years in prison.
Yeah.
Let me close this thing and see. Oh, wow, it was blinding me.
Yeah.
To the left, right?
Straight
and then to the left.
Yes, sir.
I think.
That's it.
I would eventually got
I mean,
it.
that's why I like the digital realm so much better, is because you avoid all of that.
Well, I like building, and having my own air, my compressor, and deal with my own music, and talk to my audience. But I can still do that. But my audience may be, in St. Louis.
Arguably,
to the left.
Yes, sir. Arguably, your audience could be more engaged if you did it online.
Yeah.
Because there could be a live chat that they could communicate with you. You could have the video stream going. And,
it'd be a lot bigger.
Yeah, you could have quite the production going.
Yeah. Well, I've got to commit to it.
Yeah.
And if I commit to it, I know what I'm doing in that area.
To the right and then left at the stop sign up there.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've done it for years. I built stations with my friend was engineer Randall. I met when I was still in high school when I met Randall. He picked me up at school. He's the one that brought me to El Paso. He said, "Come on to El Paso." He said, "I'll buy you a plane ticket.
Yeah.
You come, I'll turn you on to the people."
Yeah.
And that's where I met some of my biggest friends that I had for years, and they're about dead, all of them now. I happened to be on a chat talking to somebody, and it said Hollis Duncan, and I go, Hollis Duncan, that name rings a bell, and then we started talking about X-Rock 80. Well, X-Rock 80, 150,000 watts AM on 80 Clear Channel. He used to go over to Mexico and bring the tapes because it got automated back then.
Yeah.
And when my mom and dad came for my 19th birthday, they came to visit. He took them to Mexico, to Juarez. I didn't get to go. I was working or something came up and I didn't get to go, but he took them to Mexico. And I said, "Do you remember?" He goes, "Oh my God, I do, David."
Yeah.
He said, "You were 19 years old." I said, "I'm 60 something now." He started laughing. I said, "Are you still engineering?" And he said, he was in Sacramento or somewhere now. He said, "David, I got out of radio." I said, "Yeah, I hear you." He says, "I became an electrical engineer."
Huh.
He was wild, tall, skinny.
Yeah.
Cussed every other word. It was funny. And then Brad Edwards, that worked at KISS or KIIS, something like that in Los Angeles. He's the one that hired me in El Paso at K102.
Right.
And we were friends for life. Now, we lost contact, and I thought he was in Los Angeles. I was trying to call him, I said, I got to vacate Alabama. I'm warm my welcome out here. I got to go somewhere. And I was looking for him, and he was in Miami.
Yeah.
And if I would have found out, and that's when that lady was during that time frame.
You're talking
cartel.
About the Griselda Blanco, the show that I've been watching.
That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if I would have went down there with him and got a job in radio, I mean, we were pretty bad together in El Paso. We were just wild. He was a lot older than I was. I think he was 39 and I was 18. And he loved it. He really helped me. And then Lee Masters, the original Lee Masters, and I can't remember his real name. He is the CEO of NPR now. And he kept me there. And I said, "I'm leaving." I was rebellious. And him and John Carrillo, which is Mr. Leonard, he was Mr. Leonard, the voice was Scott Shannon. They all made it real big. I would have made it too if I would have kept on, but I just couldn't stay in one place long enough.
What got you into radio to begin with? If you had to pinpoint something.
When I can tell you, I remember when I was really little, I remember my dad buying my grandmother a big white solid state radio when the transistor came out.
Yep.
They had tubes. I caught the tail end of the tubes. We'd go buy tubes and test them, and they had the tester there at the drugstore or the hardware store. The solid state came out, and my dad would cut it on, and I thought, wow, people were talking, and my dad said, "Don't touch that, it will bite you if you touch it." And I really thought it was going to bite me. I mean, I really did. I go, "Where are the people? Are they in there? Are they little?" I remember thinking that. They wouldn't tell me any difference because they didn't want me to touch it.
Yeah.
And I didn't touch it. I had to be 2 years old, 3, maybe 4. But I remember that and listening. I said, "Man, I wonder if I could do that." Well, at our local mall, which is about a mile from my house where I grew up, it was called 5 Points West. They had Kittyland, amusement park. It was a permanent one, and the state fair would come there. And they had all these shops, Woolworth, been there for years,
Yeah.
Since the war, all of that. And they built a mall, and they put positions in it, and all the offices were upstairs, what they called the penthouse. Well, like I was speaking about WAQY, it was on Lom Avenue across from the fairgrounds, and the county commissioner and another disc jockey bought it and made it an R&B station. And they called it the Black Bull, WBUL. And they were on the air there. And I'd go up there, and the door was always locked. I could never get in or anything. And one day I got in, and I was talking to the disc jockey. His name was Dr. Jim. I'll never forget. And he turned me, he said, Dave, man, I'm going to turn you on to somebody that's going to help you. He said, man, I have to drive. I just can't help you.
Yeah.
And he turned me on to Brother Johnny Tidwell. He was from Jasper, and he was so cool. And he was just a natural. And I sat with him every Saturday for a year or two.
Yeah.
And then I finally started running the board during remote broadcast and stuff. They would let me do that. And then there was a problem about license or something. But anyway, the guy that owned the station worked at the powerhouse WVOK, which was a 50,000 watt, middle of the road radio station that played, rock and a little bit of country, and it was all over the state of Alabama. The lady that owned it was Miss Benz, and she owned one in Montgomery, I think in Tennessee, and I think it was Big Bam in Montgomery and WVOK in Birmingham is what she ended up having. They called her Big Annie. I never knew her, but I lived in her house, a part of it anyway. Her granddaughter inherited the house, and she let me live there when I was working there. So I worked at WVOK. The guy that owned WVUL, half of it, got me the position there. And I started driving the country coach. I did morning traffic and afternoon traffic in the airplane, which was fun for a long time. And then I was moved down, got grounded, because Ken Tremelian was a friend of mine. Me and his dad knew each other. They were in the Masonic Temple together, and we kind of hit it off. And we worked it wide after that too, because we were pretty good friends.
Yeah.
And he was going to try to get a job at Southern Airlines. He was a pilot.
Yeah.
And he loved to fly. And they said he was too old. And man, that broke that man.
Yeah.
I think that's what happened to him. And he started drinking real heavily. But he flew all kind of planes, Lear jets, a double prop. He'd fly the airline. He was just an excellent pilot.
Did radio stations originally get their, I guess, I'm going to call it a call sign, but I think you'll know what I mean by it. Did they really originally get that as a purpose so that pilots could understand where they are? Because I heard that myth growing up,
it could have been in the war. I've never heard that.
You'd have heard, live now on WZZK or something, and a pilot would be able to know when they hear that they know roughly where they are.
I never heard that.
Yeah. I don't know where I picked that theory up from.
It could be. I never heard that. I know.
How does a radio station get their call sign?
Well, like WHKW was Harold Kenneth Watts. Like me, David Wayne Tier, WDWT. You can, if it's available, you can get it. Mine's available. So I could get it if I applied for it. And they're real strict on the rules. And you got to prove to the LCC that you can carry that radio station for 6 months without any income. And if you can do that, they grant you your license. Now, that's the way it used to be. I don't know now. All I'm doing is low power, so we're nonprofit, so that never came up. But yes, you had to do that. So
you could just pick whatever.
You pick whatever you want. Now, like I was telling you, I got the job at WVOK. They finally got their license for an FM, and we called it WVOK FM. And the guy that was running it, he was a disc jockey there, and he took it. That was his baby, the FM.
Right.
And he took it, and it was automated, and we could go live when you wanted to. But it was the state-of-the-art carousels with the tapes in it, and the voice tracks. We had all of that in 1977. What's this guy doing? Shit. But anyway, we had that radio station, and we wanted WRRK. Real Rock K99 is what we were going to call it.
Right.
And it was taken, so we couldn't get it. So we ended up settling for, we should have kept WVOK. I like that, WVOK FM. because it's well known. But he wanted something different, so it was RKK, not WRRK. He said, we'll keep trying to get it, but it never came available.
Is the initial W always a W?
East of the Mississippi, all radio stations start with a W. West of the Mississippi, they start with K. Why? I don't know. That's just the law.
Okay.
And
we'd mentioned Howard Stern earlier. I remember the very first time I heard him was in San Diego on San Diego's Rock 105.3.
Oh yeah?
I don't know what their letters would have been, but
When was this?
oof.
Yeah, he was out west. That's right.
Well, he was syndicated out there, so
That's
I mean,
right.
it would have been still done in New York, but he was syndicated on San Diego's Rock 105.3.
I knew that, but I didn't know. I think he went out to Los Angeles.
I never knew if he went out there or not, but
he was everywhere. He was in Hartford, Connecticut.
Yeah, he was all over the place. I mean, he was truly.
Yeah, his dad
nationwide.
was an engineer.
Yeah,
and he had connections. And he finally made it back to New York. And he was just a shock jock, and he is just a piece of crap now.
Yeah. I haven't listened to him in probably 10 plus years.
No, I don't either. He's a dick. I can't believe he turned out. He gave the FCC a fit. Man, he was getting ready to go to jail, man.
Yeah.
They were after him, and he just straightened his ass up. And I think he got bought. That's what happened. And plus, he said, man, I'm making a lot of money here. I better get my shit together, And he had Robin and a couple of the guys. See, that's the way it worked. I knew this guy. Those guys that worked with him were jocks with him back in the old days. And, he brought them with him. He said, yeah, y'all are coming. He's sure the wealth. And that's good and all, but he's a dick now.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know the whole story, but I had some of the same situations he had in private parts.
Yeah.
The movie he had it. That's right on. Everything about that's true. They might have kind of made it more dramatic, but I had the same things happen. Go and be with an artist. Say, come on, get in the bathtub with us. I said, nah, I'm married. I can't get naked and get in the bathtub. Come on.
Right.
Nobody will know anything. And you see what happened, man. And that's uncool. But things were different back then. But it's the same old thing. Same old thing. But yes, you can pick your own call letters. And radio was a lot of fun for me. That's what I wanted to do. Ate, breathed, till I woke up, till I went to sleep. I ain't even dreamed about it. My recurring dream, you're gonna love this. This has happened for 40 years. I keep having this recurring dream. I've got a job at a big station and I'm talking, and there's no music to play. There's no records. Back then we put records on the turntable. No albums, no tapes to put in the cart machine that we dubbed off, songs we dubbed off on a cart. And I'd have to keep talking. And when I'd find something, it was out of date. A PSA or something, or a commercial. It was all out of date. And I said, what am I supposed to do? I said, let me check the network, see if there's news on it, and I'll let the news play for a little bit and try to find some music to play. Happens all the time. I'm at this big rock station and I'm having to talk. And then I'll have to leave, and then there's dead air. I said, I just have to leave it. I got to go find some music. And that's been a recurring dream for me for 40 years. I mean, probably longer than that. It's so funny. That's made me think about that. But yes, let me tell you about, let me finish a couple of these stories, tie up the loose ends. K99 was the rock station. We went up to number 1. We were a rocker, AOR. rock station. It was a void in the market for it because we had one before then. It was called WJLN-FM, which is WZZK now. And it used to be a rocker and Father Tree. I worked with him at the Bull. You know, he was Father Tree. You had these personalities back then that was on the air, and he'd read poetry, you know, and stuff. And you know, I'm mellow like cheese, you know. And the women loved him. He's a black dude. He was really cool. He worked at the phone company. He said, man, I'm getting out of radio. He said, this sucks. You can't make any money. And the fame and women were fun, you know, but that only goes so far.
Yeah.
But there was a void in the market, and we got on the air, and we had our antenna on channel 42, the tallest tower in Birmingham on Red Mountain back then. And it kept interfering with their live broadcasts and their cameras. They moved it up, down, all around. Dan Brennan spent a fortune moving that antenna around that tower. It just kept on. They bought all kind of filters, and we all frowned because we were heard everywhere with that tower antenna up that high. So we ended up having to put it on Shades Mountain, small in Escuda, and where Magic 96 is, and it was the Sheriff's Department antenna. Well, what it was public broadcast, PBS. The county sheriff's antenna was there. It was lonely up there. It was just where the transmitters were. It had a fence around it, a big tower. You could climb in the middle of it with a ladder. I went way up in that thing.
Right.
Yeah, I used to get to climb it. It had ice on it one night, man. The ice would come down, put a hole in the roof. It was wild, man. We'd have to go there every once in a while. Randall was the engineer, and we put the new transmitter in up there, and the transmission line, all of that. But we had it going, but the antenna was pointed away from Birmingham, and we had a lot of ghost signals.
Yeah.
That really sucked, man. But anyway, you could still hear us, and we rocked, and we ended up being in the top 10 radio stations in the United States in Rolling Stone magazine. So it was a big, big deal. And then Dan turned around and sold it later. Dan Brennan, that owned WVOK after, you know, Miss Benz died. I think he bought it from the Benz and made a lot of money, made a fortune, you know. And then he sold it to Max Sanders, some millionaire from Texas.
Right.
He was a pilot. He flew in with his wife, and I picked him up at the airport. And it was Bessemer Airport. That's where we picked him up. Had the cowboy hat. And he said, you want to keep working here? I go, yeah, I'll keep working. I left and went to El Paso. But him and his wife were really nice. I saw it was coming to an end. And, but anyway, Lee Masters, there was a Lee Masters in Birmingham, but he died from COVID. He was about old as I was, maybe a little bit older than I was. Well, anyway, Lee Etheridge was his name. But anyway, other guy, Lee Masters, was in El Paso, and they got with a bunch of guys, and they bought radio stations that were cheap, and they made them #1 and sold them for a fortune. But he ended up being the CEO at NPR, and he started MTV.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Slapped me in the head. I've been slapped so many times. He begged me to stay. He said, Dave, you're so talented. You're 19 years old. Man, just stay with us. Stay with us. I know you're homesick. I know you want to go home back to Alabama. He said, why don't you? He said, I tell you what, I'll fly you home for 2 weeks. Go home. And I'm going to tell you, it's not going to be the same. He said, and then you come back, okay, and work, all right? I said, no, I'm going home. Man, biggest mistake I ever made. I could have been on MTV.